Today, we're starting to read the chapter book, Peggy, Noodle, Hula Hoop Queen. This was written by a friend of mine, Dolly Dozier. She lives here in Chatham County. And it was illustrated by Monica Wyrick. Part 1, Chapter 1. During the summer of 1957, wait a minute now, that tells me that this is a historical fiction, because I know there's things in here that actually took place in history, and so this takes place in 1957. During the summer of 1957, Peggy Noodle skipped down the sidewalk with her basset hound, Penny Noodle. Peggy was the new girl again, and working on making new friends before the school year started. She was fun and friendly and easy to get along with. Meeting new friends was never scary for her, but starting over always meant people would be focused on her height. "I bet she plays basketball," said some. "Maybe she's a dancer in West Side Story," said others. When she came up on whispered conversations where new friends made guesses behind their hands, she always smiled mysteriously and shrugged her shoulders. Peggy and Penny Noodle spent the entire summer making new friends in the little town of Peak City. They skipped stones and swam in the lake. They caught lightning bugs and enjoyed the music of the tree frogs and cicadas. They dressed Penny in star-spangled capes and picked daisies in the field behind Peggy's house. Peggy was always willing to laugh and play and try something new. But when her friends suggested basketball, she countered with jacks. When they begged her to play field hockey, she brought out her Tinker Toys. She dazzled them with distractions, but never told them why she avoided sports, which was how she found herself in the very uncomfortable position of star forward. By the time the school year began at the end of August, she was nervous. While all her new friends were signing up for sports, she was on the other side of the gymnasium signing up for chess club. "Hey, Peggy Noodle," her friend Rita called out from the other side of the court. "You gonna use those long arms and legs? It's time to sign up for basketball." "No," she said, "I don't think so. I've already signed up for the chess club." Rita couldn't believe it. "Chess? Why in the world are you wasting that reach on the chess club? We could use you on the court." Again, Peggy just smiled and shrugged. Chapter 2. Peggy's friends badgered her for days, and she was running out of ways to distract them. They had no idea she had 2 left feet, and she didn't want them to see how clumsy she was. Since Easter, before her family moved to Peak City, Peggy had grown over a foot, so fast that she had outgrown her own coordination. It was the pits. As much as she dreaded her new friends witnessing her clumsiness, the anxiety of avoiding them and running straight home after school was too much to bear. So one Friday afternoon in October, Peggy gave in and went with Rita and Gabby to sign up for basketball. What a disaster! She could barely dribble the ball while running and couldn't make the basket if she was sitting on Rita's shoulders. She tried to bow out gracefully and politely, but her teammates were too supportive. They just said, "You can do it," and led her around, believing in her then when she didn't believe in herself. She tried to tell them. The first game was on a Tuesday afternoon in November. She stepped onto the court with a full team full of enthusiastic and supportive friends, cheers from the bleachers, and great revelry. Leaving was an entirely different experience. Head down, shoulders stooped. She wished she were invisible. Did you see Peggy Noodle fall when she pivoted on her first pass? Talk about noodle legs. That must be why her name's Peggy Noodle. This is the worst thing to happen since Sputnik launched over the summer. She didn't even know which end of the court to be at. She looked like a spinning top. Chapter 3. Embarrassed, rejected, friendless, Peggy walked home alone. She didn't even notice when Penny met her at the corner to walk the rest of the way home. Nobody came by after dinner to play. Nobody came to the pond to skip stones with her over the weekend. In fact, nobody visited for days. They just didn't know what to say. They were angry that Peggy had cost them the game, but felt guilty they'd pushed her too hard. Maybe they should have listened to what she tried to tell them. Maybe she should have tried harder to speak up for herself. Peggy was lonely. She walked alone to and from school for a week, except along the span between her house and the corner where Penny joined her. Being alone gave her time to think and wonder how she could have done things differently. One afternoon, Peggy saw Clara Moore in her backyard. Mrs. Moore lived across the street from Peggy's family. She was in her 60s, she was an artist, and she was really neat. She was friendly without being intrusive and had one of the most beautiful gardens Peggy had ever seen. From the sidewalk where she and Penny were walking, it looked like Mrs. Moore was dancing, swirling her arms above her head and laughing like a loon. And she seemed to be alone. Peggy and Penny decided to check it out. The closer they got, the easier it was to see Mrs. Moore's body twisting around crazily. Peggy walked up to the bright red garden gate and stood on the yellow wrought iron bench to peek over the fence. Mrs. Moore kept dancing, so Peggy cleared her throat. There's a picture from another book. "Oh, hi, Peggy. I didn't see you there." She stopped, wiggling, and walked over to join Peggy at the fence. "I didn't realize you wanted to visit today. I thought you might have come by to read again." Peggy blushed and shrugged her shoulders. Mrs. Moore was the only person she knew who called her Peggy while talking to her. "I didn't realize you saw me there," she said shyly. "I hope it's okay." The bench was such a bright, pretty color. There were flowers everywhere, and huge trees gave it good shade. It was the perfect reading spot. "Sure I did, honey," Mrs. Moore said with a warm smile. She came through the fence to sit with Peggy and Penny. A light coating of perspiration dotted her forehead, and she dabbed at it with her handkerchief. She took out of her pocket. "I figured you needed the quiet time." "Yes, ma'am. Your garden is a nice spot to read. You don't really mind, do you?" "Not a bit," said Mrs. Moore. She smiled kindly and rubbed the soft fur behind Penny's ears. "Any time you and your friends would like to sit for a while, I'm happy to share my garden." "Oh, thank you, Mrs. Moore," Peggy said, and then looked away for a moment. She wrapped her arm around Penny's back and rubbed her cheek against her soft fur on Penny's side. "But it will probably just be us for a while. My friends are all upset with me." Mrs. Moore clicked her tongue. "I doubt that, dear. They love you." "No, ma'am, not right now." "What makes you think they're upset?" "Because of me, we lost the opening game last week." Mrs. Moore nodded. Everyone in Peak City knew the game could only refer to basketball. This was a basketball crazy town. I heard about that. Tears filled Peggy's eyes, and she blinked them away quickly so she wouldn't cry. Her heart was heavy with guilt and shame. I tried to tell them, but they wouldn't listen. Mrs. Moore laid her hand on Peggy's shoulder. "Did you tell them you didn't want to play on the team?" Peggy nodded. "But they still encouraged you to join, to try?" "Well, yes, but..." They wanted you to try something new to you, and you did it? Well, yes, but... And even though you're very good at lots of different things, you weren't good at basketball? Peggy sighed heavily. No, ma'am. It's okay to try new things, Peggy. Nobody is perfect at everything they try, especially at first. Peggy moved her hand through Penny's soft fur, watching the motion carefully and thinking, yes, that's true. You just have to practice. The more she thought about it, the better she felt. Thanks, Mrs. Moore. How'd you get so smart? Well, what else? Practice. She smiled when Peggy giggled. Now, what can I do for you today? Nothing really, I guess. I was just being nosy and wanted to see why you were dancing by yourself. Mrs. Moore laughed and swatted a hand against her knee. Dancing? I wasn't dancing. Honey, I was hula hooping. Chapter 4. What's a hula hoop, and what do you do with it? My son William brought me a couple last month when he was visiting from California, and now I can't stop hooping. I'm hooked. I do it whenever I can. It's really good exercise, said Mrs. Moore. Want to try? Oh, no, ma'am. I couldn't. I'm such a klutz. I don't want to break it. She stood and pulled Peggy up with her. Honey, you can't break this hula hoop. It's plastic. Besides, it's too much fun not to try. Look how out of shape I am. Imagine how you'll do. It just takes a little practice. Come on, watch me. Okay, Peggy said cautiously, moving so she stood in the middle of the hoop where Mrs. Moore pointed. She picked it up and held it against her hips. Mrs. Moore picked up a second hoop and held it the same way. First, you need to hold it up here so it touches your waist on one side. You're going to give it a spin and then move your hips back and forth, tick-tock like a clock, to keep it going around and around. Watch me for a second, then you do it. Mrs. Moore gave it a whirl, then let out a whoop of joy as it raced around her hips, wobbling in a silly arc. After a couple of minutes, it lost its momentum and dropped to the ground. Peggy clapped and Penny barked a couple of times, caught up in the excitement. Phew, she said out of breath. Your turn. Peggy grinned and gave her hoop a whirl. She didn't move her hips enough on her first try, so it dropped and bounced on the grass as soon as she let it go. But her second try was a success. It went around and around, faster and faster, with noisy little beads inside that rattled as it twirled. Mrs. Moore cheered her on. You know, William has been telling me about these contests called hooplas, popping up all over the place. Wouldn't it be neat if we could have one here in Peak City? Oh, yes, Peggy bounced and clapped her hands. That sounds like lots of fun. Let me give him a call and see what we can get worked out. And that's where we're going to end this week. Stay tuned next week for Chapter 5, Part 2 of Peggy Noodle, Hula Hoop Queen.